Section 39 of A History of the Inquisition of Spain, Volume 4. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Diana Meilinger. A History of the Inquisition of Spain, Volume 4, by Henry Charles LEA. Book 8, Spheres of Action. Chapter 9, Witchcraft, Part 2. The 10 members of the congregation were all men of consideration, and included the licentiate Valdes, in whom we may recognize the future Inquisitor General. On the first question, as to reality or delusion, the vote stood 6-4 in favor of reality, Valdes being one of the minority, and explaining that he regarded the proofs of the accusations as insufficient, and desired inquisitors to be instructed to make greater efforts at verification. The second question was of the highest importance. For ordinary heresy, confession and repentance ensured exemption from the stake, but, in the eagerness to punish witchcraft, when a witch confessed, it was customary to abandon her, either formally or informally, to be punished by the secular authorities for the crimes assumed to be proved against her, usually sucking the blood of children, or encompassing the death of adults. Obedience to the scriptural injunction of not suffering a witch to live was general. On this point there was wide variety of opinion, but the majority decided that, when culprits were admitted to reconciliation, they were not to be remitted to the secular judges, to be punished for homicides, for such homicides may be illusory, and there was no proof beyond their confessions. After they had completed the penance assigned to them, if the secular judges chose to try them for homicide, the Inquisition could not interfere. This decision was adopted in practice, and, some years later, was cited in justification of protecting convicted witches from the secular courts. On the third question, votes were too much divided for any definite result. On the fourth there was substantial affirmative agreement. On the fifth, 5 voted that confession sufficed, but Valdes limited its sufficiency to the minor inflictions of exile, vergüenza, and scourging. With regard to the final question, as to remedial measures, it is worthy to remark that only 3 suggested greater activity and severity of the Inquisition. Nearly all favored sending preachers to instruct and enlighten the ignorant population. 2 proposed reforming the regular clergy, and 1 the secular beneficed clergy. Several thought well of building churches or monasteries on the spots where Sabbaths were held. 1 recommended an edict promising release from confiscation for those who would come forward within a specified time, and 2 voted that the Inquisition should give material aid to the poorer suspects, in order to relieve them from temptation. Valdes further presented detailed instructions for inquisitors, the most important of which were that the statements of witches implicating other parties were not to be accepted as satisfactory evidence, and that, when accused to the Inquisition, it should be ascertained whether they had already been tortured by the secular judges. Halting as these deliberations may seem, they manifest gleams of wholesome skepticism and an honest desire to reach the truth, when elsewhere throughout Christendom such questions were regarded as beyond discussion. Yet for a while the Suprema was not prepared to allow these opinions to influence action. In 1527 there was an outbreak of witchcraft in Navarre, the treatment of which by Inquisitor Avellaneda he reports in a letter written, in response to an enquiry from Íñigo de Velasco, Constable of Castile. Witchcraft, he declared, was the worst evil of the time. He had written to the king and twice to the Suprema urging a remedy, but neither at court nor on the spot was there any one who understood its cure. For 6 months he had been laboring in the mountains, where, by the help of God, he had discovered many witches. In a raid of the valley of Salazar he had captured a number and brought them to Pampeluna, where, with the regent and members of the royal council and other doctors and lawyers, the whole subject was discussed. It was agreed that witches could be carried through the air to the Sabbat, and that they committed the crimes ascribed to them, principally, it would seem, on the strength of an experiment which he had tried with one of his prisoners. On a Friday at midnight, he allowed her to anoint herself with the magic unguent which they used. She opened a window overhanging a precipice, where a cat would be dashed to pieces, and invoked the demon, who came and deposited her safely on the ground, to be recaptured on Monday with 7 others, 3 leagues away. These were all executed, after which he prosecuted his researches and discovered 3 places of assemblage, one in the valley of Salazar, with 250 members, of whom he had captured 60, another with 80 members in another valley, and the third near Roncesvalles with over 200. 50 had been executed, and he hoped, with the favor of God, to dispatch 20 more. He had discovered that which, if proper assistance were given to him, would redound to the great service of God and benefit to the Republic, for, without God's mercy, the evil would grow and the life of no one would be safe. To gratify the curiosity of the constable, Avellaneda proceeded to give a detailed account of the wonders and wickedness of the Sabbath and the evils wrought by witches. In spite of all his efforts, the demon urged them on to still greater crimes by showing them phantoms of those who had been executed, pretending that he had resuscitated them, and would resuscitate all who might be put to death. This evil, he concludes, is general throughout the world. If the constable wishes to ascertain whether there are witches in his district, he has only to observe whether the grain is withered while in bloom, or the acorns fail in the mountains, or there are children smothered, for wherever these things occur there are witches. Altogether, Avellaneda affords a typical illustration of the manner in which witchcraft was created and spread by the witch-finders. There is no reason to suppose that Avellaneda was reproved for the exuberance of his zeal, for his policy was continued in 1528, when the witch epidemic was extending to Biscay, and the civil authorities were arresting and trying offenders. More eager to assert the jurisdiction of the Inquisition than to adopt the conclusions of the Congregation, on February 22nd, 1528, Inquisitor-General Manrique ordered Sancho de Carranza de Miranda, Inquisitor of Calahorra, to go thither with full powers to investigate, try and sentence, even to relaxation, the witches who are reported to have abandoned the faith, offered themselves to the devil, and wrought much evil in killing infants and ruining the harvests. He is to demand from the civil authorities all who have been arrested, and the papers concerning their cases, for this is a matter pertaining to the Inquisition. A thorough inquest is to be made in all infected places, and edicts are to be published summoning within a given time and under such penalties as he sees fit, all culprits to come forward, and all cognizant of such offences to denounce them. There is in this no injunction of prudence and caution, no requirement that the cases are to be submitted for confirmation to the Calahorra tribunal. Carranza is provided with a fiscal and a notary, so that he can execute speedy justice, and the edict of grace is replaced by an edict of faith. It is not until 1530 that we find evidence that the discussion of 1526 was producing a change in the view taken of witchcraft and of the methods of its repression. A carta acordada, addressed to all the tribunals, enjoined special caution in all witchcraft cases, as it was a very delicate matter to handle, and this was followed by another manifesting a healthy skepticism and desire to repress popular superstition, for it stated that the ensalmadores, who cured diseases by charms, asserted that all sickness was caused by witches, wherefore they were to be asked what they meant and why they said so. The practical position assumed by this time may be gathered from a letter of December 11th, 1530, from the Suprema to the Royal Council of Navarre, where a fresh outbreak of the witch craze had, as usual, brought dissension between the tribunal and the secular courts, for the latter refused to acknowledge the exclusive jurisdiction of the Inquisition, and complained of its delays and the leniency of its sentences, in comparison with the speedy and unsparing action demanded by popular clamor. The Suprema now, in reply to the complaints of the Royal Council against the Calahorra tribunal, replied that this matter of the witches was not new. On a previous occasion there had been the same altercation. Some of the cases which had caused the most complaint had been brought to the court, and had, by order of the emperor, been examined by learned men, when, after much debate, it was ordered that the prisoners should be delivered to the inquisitors, who, after examining them, should try those pertaining to their jurisdiction, and surrender the others. There was much doubt felt as to the verification of the crimes alleged, and the Suprema deplored the executions by the secular courts, for the cases were not so clear as had been supposed. In view of all this, inquisitors were enjoined to use caution and moderation, for there is so much ambiguity in these cases that it seems impossible for human reason to reach the truth. When the same questions had arisen elsewhere, the Suprema had ordered the inquisitors to act with the greatest circumspection, for these matters were most delicate and perilous, and some inexperienced judges had been deceived in treating them. The Suprema therefore deprecated a competencia. It entreated the Royal Council to hand all cases over to the tribunal, which would return those not subject to its jurisdiction, and the inquisitors would be ordered to remove the censures and fines, which shows that the quarrel had been pushed to extremes. There was equal determination in resisting the claims of the episcopal courts to jurisdiction. In 1531 the Saragossa tribunal complains of the intrusion of the Bishop of San Angelo, who had refused to surrender a prisoner, and had invited the tribunal to join him in prosecuting witches in places under his jurisdiction. To him the Suprema accordingly wrote, asserting the exclusive cognizance of the Inquisition, and requiring him to deliver to the tribunal any prisoners whom he had arrested. End of section 39.